So let me talk to you more about what is enterprise risk management and the changing landscape of risk right now. Okay? Especially on the back of COVID, I think two things are happening. Risk is at the forefront of every single business manager, and the way they have been thinking and perceiving about risk has actually changed. So let me articulate a little more about how this is changing and what is the current thought process. To start off, right, I actually work for Marsh. Marsh is one of the world's leading or the largest insurance broking and risk consultant. Okay, so what we do is, right, let's start looking at what do we do with risk. Okay, when you look at risk, there are four things you do with risk. You first either tolerate it, or you treat it, or you terminate it, or you transfer it. Okay, so these are the four things you typically do with risk. Okay. Now, if you look at the ecosystem, right, there's always a buyer of risk transfer solution, which is typically corporates like you. It could be a building, it could be a facilities manager. So you have an infrastructure, you have an asset in terms of property, you've got people coming in, you've got vendors giving you stuff, you're manufacturing something at your location, you're doing so many things, a lot of business activities. Okay, so in each of these activities, there's an inherent risk in it. And what you try and do is basically optimize that risk in trying to manage it by way of risk management solutions. Okay, and insurance is one provision where you actually transfer that risk out. So what we do at Marsh is we act as an intermediary. We are the broker between you and the insurance market, which actually provides you with an insurance solution which helps you mitigate this. So in some sense, right, insurance is like the thing which you don't like typically. The last thing you ever want to meet is an insurance agent or a broker. But insurance is actually something which is like the lubricant. Without that, no business actually, or the entire supply chain does not work. So what we are seeing right now on the back of COVID and also the relatively volatile kind of world we are having is that the whole demand side of how people perceive risk is actually changing. Okay, what was not acceptable 6 months ago in terms of facial recognition, in terms of people taking your ID, is now on the back of COVID something which will be very, very acceptable as people go back into work. Now, how do you get the right balance between data privacy and how do you get the right balance between safety and security is an open topic. There's no real answer to that. But what is happening is everyone wants to understand the risk better. So questions around the solutions you put in, the questions around the data, how do you protect the data, all those things are open questions right now. So there's a whole landscape of how risk is actually perceived as shifted completely. So some of the models we have had in the past in order to understand risk is completely gone out of the window. We'll have to start looking at all these things from a very, very different lens. So typically, if you look at risk is always traditionally been understood on the back of lagging indicators. So when I say lagging indicators, these are basically data which is available to you in your ecosystem. So if you're taking life insurance, you have historical data about how long have people lived, average age of a woman or a man in a country and a geography based on the culture, when do they die? If you look at health, you get enough data about what health risks people have. These are all historical data. But on the back of what is actually happening in the world right now is what you need to do in order to measure risk is you need leading indicators. You need data which is actually coming at real time. You need to understand data which is not available to you by way of predicting based on historical as well as current data. So the whole data of the landscape of how you manage and perceive risk is completely changed. Okay, so that's what at Marsh we try to do. What we're trying to do is actually try to understand what are these emerging risks. And there's no other way than actually working with organizations to actually understand the risk. So if I'm actually wanting to provide you with a solution, say for cyber risk, or I want to provide you with a risk management or an insurance solution for your facilities, there's no better way other than me partnering and working with you to understand the risk landscape. So data becomes very, very important. And that's where the IoT angle comes in for us, where we really want to understand how IoT fits in, how do we actually work with data, what does this data mean to us, and on the back of this data, how can I provide you with some risk management solutions? So I think few areas where we are actually working extensively are in real-time risk management. We are also looking at and spend a lot of time working with the sharing economy. When I say sharing economy, it's all people where they're not full-time employees, they're gig workers. You have firms like Deliveroo, you've got ride companies like Grab. All of them are actually changing the face of how actually business is done. So the pricing of the insurance or the pricing of the risk also has to become dynamic. Okay, but unfortunately, right, the entire industry of the insurance industry is still based on traditional underwriting. We don't understand risks that well. We are not able to quantify those risks. And as long as we cannot quantify the risks, we will not be able to put a proper price on it. Okay, and that's what we try to understand. We are working with multiple partners to see how we could actually do this. Okay. So if you look at the new risk paradigm, right, everything which actually the former presenter actually demonstrated is all now it's there right now. Okay, everything is based on IoT. It's based on sensors. It's based on wearables. You're going to have some GPS trackers which are perhaps going to be built on to your into your clothes in the future. It's already available to you in some form on the back of a phone. As long as you share the phone, people can track you as to where you're going. And what is also going to happen is that a lot of AI solutions are going to be rolled out. The problem with the AI solutions is you don't know what algorithms are there in the box. Okay, the question is there an anti-selection there? How well do you understand the box? Is the algorithm biased? Is it going to work against you? All these questions are open-ended. We just don't understand. At the same time, a lot of blockchain solutions are coming, which basically suggests that we could actually protect your data much better. There's a lot of democratization of data, and you will perhaps end up owning the data, so that you could actually share this data with the ecosystem only based on your consent. But again, the technology is maybe 2 years from real maturity, so we don't understand all these things. So all these things are evolving. So what needs to happen is the underlying process around how you actually collect data, how you manage data, and what you do with that data is actually a risk management problem which we are trying to solve. Okay, so when you actually put out any solution or when you evaluate a solution, I think you should probably put down a lens of a risk manager to look at the entire spectrum of the risks you're actually managing. It's just not the technology risk. It's a people risk. It's a process risk. It's the risk around how you manage the entire risk process with the government. What are all the regulatory hurdles which you have to manage? You need to think through this entire spectrum of risk. Okay, so these are some of the emerging themes. If you look at even facilities management or building management or whatever it is, these are the predominant emerging themes. But the one important thing which is emerging from all these things on which we have to pay a lot of attention is that the customer is by default changed. The customer is no longer happy with you giving minimum information. The customer wants to be in full control of his entire experience. So if I really want to walk into a building right now, okay, and I go through 3 levels of scanners, okay, I really go through facial recognition scanner, I really go through a temperature scanner. At the end of the day, I really want to have control over the data. I want to know how much you know about me, and I want to be in a position to actually say, what data do you have me, and I also suggest to you that some of this data I don't want you to hold. I want you to scrub it forever. Okay, so end of the day, it's all about trying to empower the customer and providing the customer experience. So I think that's where risk management is actually going. So I think CK wanted to talk to me about putting a highlight on what risk management is, and also a little bit about what innovation means to us and what are we doing in that space. So what I'll do is I'll just talk to you a little bit about the innovation process we follow at Marsh, and then I'll talk to you with 1 or 2 use cases where we are actually using IoT-based solutions in order to understand risk better. So I think what we do in Marsh is we have an artificial intelligence lab. We also have a blockchain lab. We do a lot of partnership and hackathons with universities, with a lot of industry partners, and with people like you here who actually represent companies. So the whole purpose behind all this is to actually understand the entire risk management value chain and the landscape, and see how we could potentially come out with better solutions in the future. One of the things we try and do is we are actually very big on culture for that. Because any transformation, say digital transformation, doesn't happen in a vacuum. It needs people. You need to work with people, and all the cultural mindsets will have to change. If you don't change, change will force you. I mean, COVID is basically going to change the way in which how we behave and how we actually interact. The concept of having smart offices, which was in vogue 6 months ago, are now under question. Do I need an office? Is the kind of questions which are being answered. So basically, it's all about people and the empathy you show to people. So a lot around culture has to be done if you have to understand risk management. So I think so we focus a lot quite around digital culture as well. So let me take 2 or 3 use cases to show how we actually work on the IoT space. So one of our leading practice is basically our construction practice, which actually manages all the construction activities and where we actually provide risk management and insurance solutions. We also work extensively with REITs. We work a lot with facility management firms in order to provide risk mitigation solutions for them. So we have significant reach and depth in terms of our clientele. Okay, we work with over 1,000 across the globe. We probably partner and work with the Fortune 100 companies globally. We work across the entire spectrum of product lines. So right from employee benefits to cyber risk, you name it, we actually work on that space. We also work on multiple client markets by industry segments. So let me take one example of what we actually work on. So one active area we actually work on is around what we call as worker injury risk management. Okay, where you have a factory setting, or you have an employee who's actually working for an airline. He's actually flying. He's had an accident. So how do you actually rehabilitate them? How do you put them back into work? And how do you actively risk manage this? Traditionally, what would have been done is, right, if there's been an accident, you just get data around what had happened as a post-event. Okay, you don't understand the risk very well. Whereas now, on the back of IoT, what we are actually trying to do is we will partner with companies like Marsh, which actually provides you with ability for people to sport a smart belt. You could actually work with companies like Bionic Yantra and Bainisha, who actually give you simple stickers. You could actually use stickers which are IoT devices which actually stick onto your gadget. Now these are actively providing risk information, so you could actually figure out how much is the worker bending. Is a crew on the cabin crew, is he lifting too much of a work load when he or she lifts a box and puts it on the rack on top for you? All these things can actually be measured, and so we are actually working and partnering with companies who actually do that in order to understand risk. To be honest, do we know and do we profile the risk very well? No, we really don't understand the risk landscape very well yet, because a lot of data has to be collected. It will take a lot of time. We need to partner and work with many people to understand this, and only then we can actually quantify this. One interesting use case I'm looking at right now is working with a company called Bainisha. And if you see a small picture there, they're the guys who actually help you track your arm movements when you actually bowl. When you play cricket, one of the challenges in cricket is, is a ball legal or not? If the arm twists beyond a particular angle, the ball is considered the ball is considered to be illegal. Now, how do you actually detect this? So some of the sensors are actually very, very simple IoT devices which are available right now. So this space is really exciting for us from a data gathering perspective. Okay, so that's one example where I can cite a use case for you. The next use case we are actually working on is with a partner called Pillar in the construction space. So what you actually do here is that you've got sensors now which you actually embed as part of your construction process. As you are actually building, you would actually see that we can now start measuring temperature, humidity, pressure, anything else for that matter. And all these things are actually feeding live into your data stream, and then now you could actually measure what is the level of risk involved in that particular construction. Okay, so that your traditional models of how you actually price risk is now changed on the back of this. So I'll leave you with some examples here. Finally, to wrap up, what is the process we actually follow for innovation? I think what we try and do here is, right, firstly acknowledge that we are dealing with some unknowns. What we start with the premise that we really don't know this risk, and the whole idea is we want to understand this risk. And two things are needed for this. I think we need to understand the data. We need to be in a position to collect data. So what we actually do is we use an MVP concept where we try and get as much of validated learning with the least possible effort. So we'll work with a couple of partners or 3 carriers, which when I say carriers, it could be insurers, and you try and get the maximum validated learning within a short period of 2-3 weeks. Okay, and the focus is always on end user. As I said earlier, right, customer centricity is the key. We are trying to solve a problem for the customer. So how am I making his experience richer? How am I actually empowering him? That's how you actually build the idea. On the back of that, you build a business case. Okay, and try and you multiply the value you get out of it. To be honest, doing corporate innovation is probably very, very difficult. Consumer innovation perhaps is much better understood because it has an immediate impact because you deal directly with customers and the impact is visual. Whereas when you work with corporates, the impact is not really known. It's very hard to go to your CEO with a concrete value proposition for investment in an IoT solution when you cannot articulate what the ROI is actually going to be. So ROI is like sticking a finger in a pie. You really don't know. There are not enough data, and traditional models of how you actually do financial ROI do not apply anymore. So I think the key thing is culture here. You need to actually prepare your organization to understand that you're dealing with uncertainties right now, and the fact that there's not enough data to actually give you a foolproof ROI. But you can build some model. You start with a base model on an ROI and try and see how you could actually refine this model as you go when you get more data points. So it's basically going to be a journey. So, but it's a journey which all of us as organizations have to commit right now. Okay. And on the back of that, you basically build a design-centric ecosystem, where you actually try and expand the reach. And one of the key things you should always look at is value chain efficiency. Rather than focus on one aspect of what you're trying to solve, look at the end-to-end spectrum of the value chain. And in your domain, so if you're working for a facilities management company, just look at your entire value chain, and then look at the entire value chain together and not in isolation, and then try and figure out how actually any of the solutions you're plugging in is relevant for you, and how does it drive increased customer satisfaction. And then on the back of that, you actually build out your entire design-centric ecosystem. So finally, to wrap up, I think what I would suggest is there are 3 interesting books I would really like to recommend. These are my favorite books. I'll send a copy of this presentation to you. One of the books you should definitely read is what is called as Reckoning with Risk. Okay, it's written by a psychologist. The second book is a historian writing a book on risk against the gods. If you actually go and look at that book, you would really feel that we should, historically, human beings have always been resilient, and on the back of the COVID, you could actually see that how resilient we are becoming as a society. And finally, the book by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, the book called The Black Swan. COVID could be considered a black swan event, which is perhaps a rare event for which we don't understand the model. So we don't know how the society will behave on the back of this. We don't have any idea or data on how things will happen. We are not clear on when the wave 2 of the COVID will surface. Is it going to be back? Are we going to live with this for the near future? These are all open questions which a lot of experts having a lot of ideas, but nothing in concrete. So I think these are 3 great books which you could read, which gives you a complete perspective about how risk is managed and how insurance as a solution can fit in here.